Peace, fam. I'm going to continue the conversation on mental illness in black communities because I think that we have to. We do not talk about it enough. Those living with mental disorders are shamed and face stigma, not just from the outside, but within our families. And it's not acceptable. It is not acceptable. If people are able to live happy and full lives, that is great, and we want that. But we also have to acknowledge the horrors of slavery that we've come through, what our ancestors dealt with on a daily basis, every day. We have to talk about it. So I'm going to be sharing an excerpt from my short story, Tweenlet, which was published with A Gypsy's Library by Negra Safa Press, which is a woman of color press. I absolutely adore indie presses, and I fall more in love with those that are both conscious and make an effort to be inclusive of the stories that they accept for publication. So this is available on Amazon. It's A Gypsy's Library, Negra Safa Press, Volume 1. They have several. This is Volume 1. And so I'm just honored to have my thoughts and my words and my feelings included. There are also wonderful stories and poems by other writers. Encourage you to get it. Tweenlet is told from my 12-year-old point of view, so I'm using my 12-year-old voice. And if you've gone through tweendom and come out to young adulthood and adulthood, you know that being a tween is a conflicting time anyway. Your body is changing. You're trying to assert your independence. You're not a little kid anymore. You're not quite a teenager. And for people who have experienced different things that may cause setbacks, for me, mine was CSA, or childhood sexual abuse. My perpetrator was my father's father, and between daddy's illness and me trying to reconcile my feelings around sexuality, it was a handful. I was promiscuous because of CSA. I drank to numb the feeling of just feeling different and bad about myself. And I did some things that I was not proud of, and I did it for a lot of years, not understanding that my fallout was showing up in my life as additional dysfunction. So I had to come to grips with that. I've done counseling, I've done one-on-one therapy, I've done a lot of group therapy because I like getting the hearing stories from other people, how they cope. But at one point, I was in counseling for domestic violence. Oh boy, that was very shameful too. And I went to a meeting not knowing what to expect, and I got there and it was a room full of white women, and I was like, I'm not going to share too much. I'm just going to sit and check it out, because what could we have in common? And I'm here to tell you that by the end of the second meeting, those white women and I were sisters. The common thread that united us was a need for survival. And so we had to learn how domestic violence was affecting us, how we got into it, how we fell for people that did not honor us. And I was asked by the co-facilitator for that group to make an appointment to see her individually, because I had started sharing, and I was, giving feedback to other people. And she was like, that is great that you want to help other people so much, Miss Imani, but you still have work to do, and I want to deal with you one-on-one. And so I thank her for that. So at that point, I was in therapy twice a week, once for group and one for individual counseling for domestic violence. And I've been in therapy on and off pretty much my entire adult life. And so I say this to say, if you are not feeling the one-on-one situation, because black people don't really like to get into therapy. We're told to be strong, that only weak people do that, and that is just the biggest crock of bull. Everybody has the right to live their best selves, and if we don't deal with things that we've been through that are affecting us and having a negative impact on our life, for me it was promiscuity and alcohol. If we don't take care of it, it will take over our lives. So what I'm saying is, my issues led to some very serious behaviors that were all taking me down a rabbit hole. And so if you know that you are not feeling your best self, talk to someone. It's okay. Give yourself permission to get the help that you need. So I'm going to be sharing a piece that happened when Daddy was sick, and we called it sick in our household. I didn't have any other language. I think in the 70s, when I first became aware that Daddy was going to have these bouts from time to time, it was called manic depressive, and now it's bipolar disorder. So it's all about education and awareness. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started. We lived on a very family-oriented block. Kids were kids. They listened when adults whispered. I couldn't imagine the painted stories that crossed their lips when my parents argued. They were loud. More painful were the in-your-face taunts after Daddy claimed he was Black Jesus on the front porch, declaring that everyone should gather and see his piercings. That was the one and only time I was frightened of my daddy. At the time, I didn't understand the struggle of being a black man in America. And I spell America Amerikakka, living with mental illness. It was like a bad dream. More concerning about him being outside screaming was the fact that he seemed so far away. I couldn't get him to look at me. He was gone. Time literally stood still, and when he called my name moments later, I froze. I'm sure I managed a weak nod of my head to affirm, because actually speaking was more than I could handle. I'd been frightened of Daddy, my daddy, who left allowance with Mama after I refused his presents and monetary gifts that I looked at as bribes after discovering and asking him about an affair he had had while married to Mama. The feelings were so confusing. Daddy was my heart, but he didn't understand anything that was going on with me. It was like sinking into quicksand and wanting to save everyone, but not knowing how to save yourself. I'd never been scared of my daddy, who came bearing gifts every Valentine's Day, a card and chocolates for me, and a bigger box for Mama, even though they were not married anymore. The same daddy that gave bear hugs and could make my frown turn into a smile with his renditions of Tracks of My Tears and Hey Jude, no matter how old I got. Daddy, who took me to every daddy-daughter dance the Bluebirds and Campfire Girls held. Daddy, who chaperoned a field trip to Greenfield Village. I was so proud that day. I loved my daddy and decided to pay attention to see if I could figure out what made him sick. When Daddy was manic, he would befriend just about anyone, inviting them home to talk. Mama served as interference, encouraging him to socialize away from the house or leaving with us in tow when things spiraled out of control. We'd pack for the weekend or week and stay with close friends while Mama sorted things out. Times away were indoor days, no playing outside where we could be spotted. We were gone for 2 weeks one summer, and our host kids felt so bad for me that they stayed inside too. Being uprooted is never an easy situation, but it was a real part of my childhood. Daddy was well when his father, the perpetrator, died, and my parents felt I needed to make the trip to Tennessee to bury my grandfather. Arriving at his house in Tennessee with that peculiar smell that said he was going to bother and pester Chester the molester sickened me. I felt confused. Why did I need to be there? My cousins were there, my sibling was there. I was the oldest grandchild and didn't feel really grand at all. In fact, I felt really small. Mama and Daddy should have let me decide if I wanted to go to his funeral. It made me feel unimportant. I began to feel really bad, like I didn't matter. Or maybe if I didn't talk so much, I would be lovable enough so that this wouldn't have happened. If I were more lovable, more so than him, he would have gone straight to jail. As the station wagon that held my younger sister, 4 cousins, Daddy, and my aunt and uncle pulled into the driveway and under the familiar carport, I felt queasy. I saw the porch swing that shielded me from the sun on prior visits and wondered what would hold back the dis-ease that was growing in the pit of my stomach. Heading into the side door, I didn't participate in my cousins and sisters goofing around. They were glad that the 10-plus hour journey had landed them at their destination. They were ready to stretch out and relax, even though the atmosphere was somber. I didn't busy myself with their chatter because my senses were going into overload. As I entered the kitchen off the carport, I smelled him, although he'd been in the hospital and not at the house lately. It was the memory of that smell that would sneak up on me if I didn't tune it out quickly enough, making me both sad and angry, even though he would be hundreds of miles away. I tried to find footing in something familiar besides that peculiar smell. Gazing around the kitchen, I saw the washer and dryer set on the left side of the room. The house was very cozy, although the living room was not a place to play. The regular grandmotherly knickknacks placed here and there rested on hand-stitched doilies, a snow globe, a bowl of plastic fruit, and great-grandmother's footstools all had their rightful place. The family pictures on the walls were not many in number, but did include a picture of Dr. King and the standard Jesus portrait of the era. While in Chattanooga, I showed my natural black ass. I acted out. I didn't feel like it was my doing. Something was controlling how I talked to people, and boy was it nasty. I was angry and confused and couldn't figure out how to say it, so I acted the fool. My grounding was over with a trip to his funeral. No police, no jail, and no reassurance, really, that I wasn't bad, or at least not as bad as him. My family loved him, revered him even, and it tore me up. And I'll stop there because I've given you a whole lot. I've talked about triggers for people who are survivors of childhood sexual abuse. I've talked about some of the fallout that comes with that. For me, it was promiscuity and drinking. And I've talked about living with mental illness in my immediate family. And I know that I'm not alone. It took a long time to write this story, like years. Putting it down, picking it back up, coming back to it, reliving all those feelings again. But I think that it is so important that I allowed myself that release, that I was gentle enough with myself to allow the release to come out on paper. And now that it is in print form, enclosed within pages of a book, I really am hoping that people will read it, and if they haven't started their writing journey for their own personal self-healing, that they'll do so. I have been married 3 times. I'm giving you the kind of the fallout of my situation. I'm married 3 times. Um, all 3 have ended in divorce. And for the last 7 years, I have been um, intentionally celibate. I don't date. I am focused on, still focused on healing. And I just turned 54 June 1st. Shout out to all the Geminis. Um, so it's been a lifetime of work and healing to get me to this point. And it hurts my spirit that shaming goes on not only for survivors of childhood sexual abuse, but for people living with mental illness. These, again, are direct fallouts from slavery that we haven't dealt with because that topic, we haven't dealt with it as a village because the topic is so painful. I really feel like I connect with a small portion of what the ancestors went through. Those black girls and women who were ordered up to the big house to satisfy the whims of rapists who owned them. And so I take particular offense when it happens within our own families and we protect perpetrators. It is not okay. The topic of rape culture is dynamic right now. It's really huge. And anybody that is going through and wondering if they should speak up about something, even if it happened decades ago, I encourage you to do so. You have a right to live in your truth. And what was taken from you is not something that you can get back. But what you can do is use your voice to make your peace with it and call those mofos out. I personally have no feelings of love for my grandfather. I forgive him only because I did not want those bad feelings to kill me, and they were trying to. I was just a mess inside, just a mess. And so it's taken, like I said, a lot of work, and it's important that you do the self-work for yourself. And the more that these conversations happen, you will find community. I attended an incest survivors group in Long Beach, California in 2010. And I was asked to leave that group when I came out as queer. Nobody goes into a sexual survivors incest group because it's the place to be. You know, it is from a place of pain that you enter into that group hoping to find a safe space. That did not happen for me. But as an outcome of that, I am now and have been a Speakers Bureau volunteer with RAIN, the national organization. And RAIN stands for Rape and Incest. Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. And they do really, really good work. And so if you are going through, that is another resource. Just look them up online. Capital RAINN. All right, thank you. I think I'll close out here. It looks like the washer is stopped. I'll go throw my clothes into the dryer. But let's keep talking, y'all. I love you. Peace and blessings.